everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2019 and the second part of this experiment where we're taking a look at what would happen if the Welsh Premier League had £1 billion in every single team. Now when we left off last time we had gone 5 years into the future. We went into a bit of detail over how each team did, how their transfers went and how the competition reputation went. So they climbed up from around 118th, possibly... yeah, it was 118th, got as high as 89th and 91st, and then began to drop down a bit because the teams weren't doing that well in Europe. Now, what we're going to do today is we're actually going to jump forward 50 years in time. We're going big time right forward, possibly to one of the teams doing well in Europe, you never know. But I think it's going to take around that long for these teams to spend the kind of money, attract the kind of player, build the reputation, and be successful to boost the coefficient rankings. There are so many things at play that I think this is going to be an extremely long experiment. So rather than do 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we're just going to go forward 50 years in time and see what the case is. Now, I haven't gone the 50 years ahead yet. I just let the game auto-save and then turned it off. So I will be looking at this for the first time. The way I'm thinking of doing is we'll look at who the league winners have been so we know which big teams to look out for. We'll then look at the transfers of the league to get an idea of how much money they're spending. And then we will also look at the European competitions and see which teams made it into the group stages, first of the Europa League, then the Champions League. So that's the way we're going to take this forward. We've got a lot of years to get through, so we'll do that quickly. If you are enjoying this experiment, make sure to hit a like down below. Hit the like button if you'd like to see another part to this experiment. If we don't get a beautiful resolution at the end of this episode, maybe we'll want another part. But do subscribe if you want more experiments like this as well, and let me know in the comments for any suggestions for experiments that you want to see, or if there are things that you want to see in this experiment that I haven't shown but you want to see in the next part, let me know down below. But now let's go forward to the year 2073 and see how the Welsh League is looking. Well, we are now 50 years into the future. It's the year 2073, and if we go right down to the beginning, when we started this experiment, the New Saints, I think they are, yep, TNS, the New Saints, were the leading team in the Welsh Premier League. They were then replaced by Connah's Quay, Barry doing well as well, and since then we've had Carmarthen have a bit of a run of good form. I'm not going to pronounce this team's name because I know I'll be absolutely butchered for it. If I had to guess, it's Cavan Druids, but I have no idea, and that was probably more of a Scottish accent than a Welsh one. Llandudno, or Llandudno, getting a couple of victories in there. Connah's Quay as well. Further up, TNS made a bit of a renaissance. Bala coming out of nowhere to do well as well, and Llandudno and Carmarthen also doing very well at the top of this league. So a bit of a mixed picture actually. Instead of having just one team dominate the league, we've actually got a situation where there are 4 or 5 teams all competing at the top, which may mean there's more chance of success in Europe. If there's 2 or 3 teams who are able to consistently challenge each other, they're likely to all go further in the competitions, and if there was just one team that you were relying on to try and be successful. So at the moment, about 3 teams, Llandudno, TNS and Carmarthen doing well. And then a little bit before that, we did have a few other teams also doing quite well, but I'd be surprised if there was much European success up to about 2030, because that's about 15 years along the line. This is 50 years along the line. But if we look at the profile of the Welsh Premier League, you can see that they're all the way up to 14th now. They're right behind the Ladbrokes Premiership in Scotland, but actually ahead of the Eredivisie in Holland. So they've come up quite a long way. I'm surprised to see the Eredivisie so far down the competition reputation rankings. But you can see there's a few surprising leagues above them. The Ukrainian Premier League, for instance, a Romanian First League I wouldn't expect to see there. But the Welsh Premier League above the Eredivisie and the Turkish Super League as well. So they are starting to get up there, and you can see they're about 3.5 stars now. The Premier League at the top, joint really with the French, German and Spanish leagues. And then you've got the 4-star leagues of Italy, Portugal and Belgium behind that. So if they're this far up the competition reputations, they are likely to have done really well in the European competition. So what we'll do is we'll start with the Europa League. We'll have a look at the group stage results that came out of that, because we can probably assume that they did start to make it past the qualifying rounds if they're this far up. And realistically, they should be doing about as well as Ajax and Celtic in the league. At least one Welsh Premier League teams should be doing that well, which should be consistent runs to the knockout stages of the Europa League and some group stage performances at the Champions League. So let's go, actually before we go and have a look let's have a look at the transfers that we've seen over the last 50 years. We will run through these extremely quickly. When we left off, this is the kind of fees we were looking at. The most that had been spent up to where we left off was 215,000. There were a few in and around that amount, but 275,000 was the highest. And after that, it actually went down a little bit before starting to come back up. You see 550k there, the biggest by far, and this is some 20 years later, and that is still the record. Then we get to 600k, 650k at this point, 900k, and then we get our first 1.3 million pound transfer from Barnsley to TNS. 2.3 million pounds from Middlesbrough to Bala the very next season, so a big jump. Then 3.8 million, drops back a little bit, but then a £6 million transfer to Bala, Aidan Lee from Stoke. So a huge spike around this point compared to where we were before. And you can see this number just creeping up every couple of years. And then you get the 10 million transfer barrier broken. 13.5 to Glendano from Middlesbrough. And you can see that the 10 million is starting to appear a little bit more often. Bearing in mind we're nearly up to where we are at the moment. 16.5 in the 67-68 season, and then the 20 million barrier falls in the 69-70 season as well, and most recently 10 million, the biggest transfer going on. So you can see that, bearing in mind when we first started this way back in the 18-19 season, 40k was the most being spent, and then that started to go up to 100, 250k. We're now up to a 20 million pound transfer occurring in the Welsh Premier League, which is probably enough money to buy all of those teams in real life at the moment. So the money really starting to feed into these clubs. But let's have a look at the Europa League group stage next and see how they've got on. Now, trying to start with the group stages is a little bit too difficult because there's a lot of scrolling and we've got 50 years to go through. So instead, because there's still 32 teams involved at this point, we'll start with the first knockout round. When we left off, obviously there were no Welsh teams here. They were struggling to get into the group stage, really, let alone go any further than that. So we're just going to start to run through and look for the Welsh flag or Welsh symbol appearing on the screen. I am sure you guys will let me know in the comments if I miss them, but I'm going to go slowly until we first see them appear on the screen, because this will give you an idea. And you can see it there, actually it was only the 38-39 season, and you can see that here Cefn Druids, I have no idea how to pronounce that, but they have managed to make it to the first knockouts round. They were beaten 4-0 by Lille over 2 legs though, but it didn't take that long. That's about 21 years. And bearing in mind that they were down about 114th in the world rankings for the leagues, that's a really impressive performance to get to the knockout stages of one of these competitions, and that would be enough to really boost the coefficient and get them up into a position where the clubs start to get a better reputation and start being able to attract some of the better players. Now I'm going to keep going slowly until we see them appear a little bit more consistently, which I don't think is too far away. If they've already done it once, I'm sure they'll be doing it again soon. But you can see the Scottish team's doing reasonably well, and bearing in mind that the Welsh League is now where the Scottish League is, it's a sign of how many of the Welsh teams must be getting through to this kind of stage. The Belgian League as well was only just above the Welsh League, so they're getting about 3 or 4 teams into these knockout stages, so it'll be the same for Wales. But it looks like after that first one, there's been quite a long barren spell, because we're into 56, 57 now, and they are still just not appearing as we go forward. So I don't know when they've had this big surge to end up right up in the top 20 leagues in Europe, but they're still not there. They're still not appearing in this. And there we go. Here is the second one. It was 37-38, was it, the last one? So we're now 25 years further into the future, just to see Carmarthen get knocked out by Borussia Dortmund 5-1 on aggregate, 3-0 defeat at home as well. But they finally made it through to another one of these. And are we going to have to wait another 30 years for them to do it again? If so, we might have to think about a big cash injection to really get them to going. But I can only assume they did make it to some more of these. You just can't see it happening. There we go. Finally, we get another one. TNS actually making it through. Beaten 7-1 by Leipzig. And actually, we had 2 Welsh teams in there. Carmarthen beaten by FC Utrecht. So nobody getting past this first knockout stage at this point. But we're starting to see the Welsh teams actually appear not just one team but two teams in the knockout stages. So they must have 2 or 3 teams in the group stage. We see TNS again here getting through, and in the most recent season none of them managed to make it out of the group stage, and it's probably not going to be a massive surprise as if we have a look at the Champions League group stages going back some time to maybe the 23-24 season. If we look at the best placed, or the best placed playoff, I think, is that no, that's not the best place, Champions playoff, there we go. This is where we will see some of the Welsh teams, I think, because that's the third qualifying goes into the playoff. Maybe if we start with the third qualifying, we'll be able to see, and there's less teams here that we have to worry about. So we can see here Carmarthen getting knocked out in this fourth qualifying round, but they are starting to get through those preliminary rounds. There is a lot of the luck of the draw involved with the Champions League, because if you pull out some of the big teams, you're not going to get anywhere, but you can have a bit of fortune and get through these quite quickly. And you can see they haven't had any fortune for a little while here. They had that one time that they managed to make it through, but as they go up the league rankings, they will have teams start to appear who are automatically placed into the best playoffs or into the group stage. And you can see Carmarthen here beaten by Midtjylland 5-0 on aggregate. And there we go again, another Welsh team. TNS very narrowly beaten by Levski from Bulgaria. But if they're starting to appear at this stage a little bit more regularly, there is a chance that they will start to get into the group stage as well. TNS again appearing there, so they're appearing more frequently than they were at the start. Another one here, TNS beaten by Dinamo, and that's part of the luck of the draw again, because Dinamo are a good team. Bala beaten on aggregate in that one, which is quite unfortunate. And then TNS finally, they beat Slovan Liberec to get into the next round, the playoff. And they did lose to AEK in that playoff, but at least now we know we can start to look at this playoff round where there are so few teams. Llandudno again making it into the playoff, but beaten by CFR Cluj from Romania. Carmarthen beaten by Midtjylland again in the playoff, but they're starting to appear in this playoff almost every year. We're having a bit of a barren spell again now. But it could be that they start to drop into the group stage automatically if their ranking gets up high enough. TNS beaten again by Olympiacos. And in the most recent year, Connorskey beaten by Celtic. So they're not quite at the point where they have beaten the Scottish teams. But it doesn't look like they have any teams in the group stage, unless they've managed to get an automatic place, which we will see here, I suppose. And it doesn't, to me, look like they've got a single Welsh team in the Champions League. So nobody from Wales has yet managed to make it into the Champions League group stage, but they are getting more and more teams appearing at that final qualifying round, and it looks like we're probably on a little bit of a cusp now where they might start to qualify for the Champions League group stages automatically, because if we go back to the Welsh Premier League, you see they're up in 14th place, but if we look at the league table for the last season gone, then we can see champions there, TNS, but we can also see they have got a team here qualified as champions, but Carmarthen have got the second Champions League place, and then there are 3 teams in the Europa League. They do have a European playoff, but they've got 5 teams going into Europe now, 2 of them into the Champions League playoff stages. And I think if we have a look, maybe go back to the Champions League and have a look at where they're entering those Champions League stages. Well, it looks like that despite the fact that TNS did finish as champions, they have not qualified for Europe, possibly due to their stadium restrictions. If we look at the profile here, they've got a capacity of 3,000. And if we look at Carmarthen and their stadium, they have a grass pitch, only have 1,500, but I saw that TNS had a synthetic pitch, and that could be what is stopping them getting into the Champions League, because I can't see any other reason why they wouldn't be there. Maybe if we look at their senior squad schedule, you can see they're definitely not in Europe despite finishing as champions, but the year before that they were in Europe in the 71-72 season, so I don't understand if they finished as champions. Maybe they broke the Champions League financial fair play. That is the other option that might have happened. They could have got a suspension. If we look at their landmarks, you can see here, there we go, club fail European Champions Cup financial fair play regulations, which means that they can't play in Europe despite having made it to the playoff leg and lose very narrowly to Olympiacos over 2 legs and then be in the group stage. It was not enough because of the amount of money they're now spending on their transfers. They weren't able to play in the Champions League in this season. So that is the answer as to why they weren't there. But it looks like they get one Champions League place, which drops them in at the second or third qualifying round, and then they get 3 Europa League places, which do drop at least one of them into the group stage as well. So they are starting to get there. They will get more places in the Champions League, in the Europa League, if they can crack this kind of top 10 by the next time. But that is going to be it for today's episode. If you do want to see another one of these episodes, do drop a like on the video and I can make sure to go ahead and record that. I think next time we could even look at going 100 years into the future instead of the 50 that we did this time. But let's get a load of likes on the video if you would like to see that, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. There will be a new experiment up next if we don't do a third part to this, so do hit that like button if you do want one more part, and let me know in the comments anything you'd like to see in that next part that wasn't covered today. But until next time, see ya.